When the wildfire consumed the town of Whispering Pines, everyone thought everything precious had turned to ash. But then, on a silent morning, amidst the grey ruins, a bobcat appeared, dragging an old battered bag behind it as if it had come back to return something. No one understood why it came back. No one had shown them the way. Yet because of that return, a man who had just lost his wife, a woman who thought she had grown used to loneliness, and a 6-year-old child, each found again something they thought had been lost forever. This isn't just a story about a wild animal. It's a story about a place called home, and about wild things that somehow still know how to love. Something was moving through the ash. Not a human, not a fire truck, but a low, solid form with tufted ears and amber eyes that pierced through the smoky air. Daniel Ross saw it first, on the 5th morning after the fire. The air no longer smelled of flames, but the scent of scorched plastic and rotting wood still hung thick. The whole town felt like someone who had just buried a dear friend. He stood on the porch of a makeshift wooden cabin, a cup of cold coffee in hand. The world around him had been drained of all color. Only gray, white, and charred brown remained. And then, in the midst of that desolation, a bobcat emerged, silent as though it had always belonged here. And it was carrying something. Let's deepen and extend the opening scene. The early wind slipped through the burnt pine forest, whispering like the voices of trees that had died. The forest outside Daniel's cabin, once dense, now stood as blackened stumps and lingering smoke. He never thought a place could vanish so quickly, in just 4 days of red flame. Daniel had only moved to Whispering Pines 3 weeks ago, after his wife died in a car accident in Oregon. They had once planned to retire here, but now it was just him, and the cold shadow of everything left unfinished. The townsfolk had evacuated. Roads were blocked off. No neighbors remained. Daniel didn't know anyone, had no one to ask about anything. The stillness of Whispering Pines no longer felt like peace. It was now a kind of emptiness. He was about to go back inside when his eyes froze. A quiet figure approached from afar, walking down the ashen road like something crossing the face of a dead moon. Its head was low, shoulders hunched, steps light yet powerful. It wasn't large, barely twice the size of a house cat, but its walk was solid and its short tail flicked with each step. Daniel held his breath. A bobcat. There was no mistaking it. Pointed ears, dappled back, and an uncanny presence. Wild, yet purposeful. What surprised him even more was the thing it was dragging, an old canvas bag soaked and streaked with ash, gripped tightly in its jaws. The bag was large, nearly half the size of the bobcat, and every step seemed an effort, like someone pulling a heavy memory behind them. Daniel stood still on the wooden steps, heart torn between instinct and curiosity. Part of him wanted to retreat inside, slam the door, and lock everything. But this bobcat didn't look like a scared, lost animal. It didn't glance around, didn't sneak or cower. It walked as if it knew the way, knew exactly where it was going, and more than that, I knew why it had to bring the bag. They passed 3 blocks, or rather, what was left of homes that once stood there. Each of the bobcat's steps left a faint imprint in the ash. It didn't look back, just pulled the bag, its worn strap clenched between its teeth. Daniel kept his distance, not daring to breathe too loudly. It felt like he was tracing the outline of a dream, something both wild and sacred, a forest secret guiding him to where it had chosen to reveal itself. Most of the townspeople had already evacuated or were cleaning up. Those who remained, scattered on porches, behind smoke-stained windows, only glanced at the animal, then nodded silently, as if familiar with its presence. An old man with a snowy beard nodded at Daniel. "Finn's come back, has he?" "About time." What belongs here always finds its way back. Finn, the bobcat, had a name. A name not wild like its form, but familiar, like someone had whispered it over and over for years. Daniel hadn't even asked when Finn suddenly turned onto a narrow ash-covered path, leading to a cabin tucked beneath the charred trees. The roof had holes patched with a tarp. Soot streaked down the walls. A swing hung lopsided in the yard, one rope half burned like a memory ripped in half. Finn didn't hesitate. He stepped onto the porch, placed the bag on the tiled floor, and let out a sound. Not a growl, not a hiss. A thin, wind-like cry, high-pitched, short, and then gone. Like a bird calling the flock, like a soft reminder. Daniel stood by the fence, fingers gripping his backpack strap, heart racing. The wooden door creaked open. A woman in an old shirt, hair hastily tied back, eyes squinting against the light. And then she froze. "Finn." Her voice cracked like wind caught in her throat. The bobcat stared at her, unmoving, then tilted his head slightly and rubbed his face against the step as if asking permission to come home. She stepped down, picked up the canvas bag, opened it, her hands trembling slightly. Inside were a can of cat food, a pouch of dry kibble, a sealed pack of oats, and a handkerchief embroidered with EM, likely blown from the storage room in the night of wind and fire. The woman looked at Finn, then up at Daniel, still frozen at the edge of the yard, as though he had stumbled into a story that wasn't his. I'm sorry," Daniel said quietly. "I saw him pulling the bag, and I thought he might be hurt. I didn't think he knew his way back." She smiled, a tired but unburdened smile. "He always knows the way, sometimes. You just have to get a little lost before you can come home." "Finn grew up here?" he asked. "Grew up with me," she said softly. "I'm Eliza. And you are?" "Daniel. I just moved in, about 10 days before the fire." He scratched his head awkwardly. "Thought I'd be starting life over. Turns out the whole forest decided to do the same." Eliza let out a faint laugh, a rare sound in this town of ash. "Come on in," she said. "We've got boiled water and instant coffee. Nothing fancy, but better than sitting in silence alone." Daniel followed slowly, a strange warmth stirring in him, like being invited to sit by a fire that had always been burning, just waiting for someone to join. Finn went first, tail swaying gently, and curled beside a metal water bowl in the kitchen corner, eyes calm as though he'd never left. Eliza placed a kettle on a camping stove, her motions unhurried, as if every movement in that kitchen carried the warmth of old time. Light from a rechargeable lamp filtered through the porch roof, casting Finn's shadow on the wooden wall, now slightly warped from smoke and moisture. "He's smart," Eliza said, her voice husky but soft, her gaze gentle as she looked at Finn, curled beside the bowl. "Knows when it's time to come back. Knows when people need something to believe in." Daniel was silent, his hand tightening around the coffee cup, waiting for hot water. He didn't dare interrupt, afraid to break the hush that hung like mist. And then Eliza began to speak. "Nearly 7 years ago," she said, opening the instant coffee packet as if unwrapping a carefully folded memory. "It was after a big storm, not a wildfire like this, but cold winds that knocked down trees. I went out to check the fence at the back of the property. That's when I saw him, small as my hand, soaked, shivering in a pile of fallen branches and wet leaves." Eliza paused, poured water into 2 chipped ceramic mugs, steam rising with the scent of memory. "I should have called animal rescue. That would have been the proper thing, but my husband had passed less than a year before. This house was colder than any winter I'd known. And then That little creature, eyes barely open, still trying to lift his head and mew. I couldn't leave him. Daniel nodded slightly, sipping coffee that tasted of nothing, only feeling the silence in his chest, stirred by the vivid image she painted. I brought him in, wrapped him in warm cloth, used a dropper to feed him goat's milk. It was like raising a child, or maybe raising myself. Every time he twitched or stirred, I felt alive, and so, for now, became forever. You named him Finn. Eliza smiled and nodded. From Fionn. In Irish, it means bright or fair. The first time he opened his eyes, they were like green fire in a grey winter. I looked into them and saw parts of myself I thought were gone. Daniel glanced at Finn, now dozing, claws twitching gently as if dreaming. His throat tightened, not just from the story, but from the way Eliza told it, without tears, yet every word pulled from someplace deep. When he got older, she continued, I tried to do it right. Didn't let him into the house, didn't pet him like a cat. Built a shelter near the forest, trained him to hunt field mice. But he had his own plans. Daniel chuckled softly. Escape the pen? More than that. He figured out how to unlatch it, lifted the lock himself. Every morning I'd find him on the porch, tail wagging like he was asking, ready for a new day. Back then, my daughter, Rachel, had just moved here after a divorce. Brought her boy, Noah, barely learning to walk. Finn was inseparable from the kid, followed every step. Slept by his crib, like he was born to do just that. Daniel murmured, a guardian spirit. Eliza nodded, her eyes glistening like a lantern long left without oil. Finn never left Noah. Not until my family moved to the city for work. The house went quiet again. But Finn stayed. He came and went. Every evening he'd sit at the doorstep as if waiting for something to return. She paused, then continued. Then the fire came. The wind blew down from the mountain like a demon unleashed. I didn't have time to open Finn's pen. By the time the smoke grew thick, I had to leave, and I thought I'd lost him. Her voice faltered. Until today. Daniel tightened his grip on the cup in his hands. Finn blinked, then slowly rose, walking toward Eliza and nudging her leg, as if at that very moment he wanted to confirm, I'm still here, still your small light in this season of ash. Is that why Mr. Whitaker has that sign out front that says, Warning Bobcat on duty? Daniel asked, taking a sip of the now cold coffee that somehow still warmed his chest. I thought it was a joke. Eliza chuckled, the kind of laugh that made Finn, dozing beneath her chair, lift his head and twitch his ears. Oh, he's joking, but not entirely. Some insurance salesman once got stared down by Finn for a full 10 minutes over the fence. Never came back. Daniel laughed, the first time his lips curved without effort. There was something in this house. The smell of charred wood mixed with cheap coffee, the quiet breath of the bobcat, that softened his heart, like a small stream seeping through frozen stone. Before the fire, he had believed he had come here just to finish the rest of his life. But now, hearing Eliza speak of a wild animal that found its way back after the end of the world, he began to think maybe he too could find a path. The sun dipped low as Daniel stood, a bit hesitant. I should head back before dark. Still no streetlights, and that forest road doesn't exactly invite visitors. Eliza nodded, rising with him. Thank you for stopping by. I didn't know I needed someone to talk to until someone sat here. Finn let out a soft chirp as she nudged him gently with her foot. He gave her a mock glare, then stood up with the slow grace of an old man roused too early. Do you need anything? Daniel asked. I've got a few canned goods, a backup battery. We're fine, Eliza smiled. Thanks to the gift this little friend brought home. She looked at Finn. But if you ever want to come back, I've got more instant coffee. Daniel nodded. His hand was already on the doorknob when she added, "Noah, my grandson. He'd love to hear how you followed Finn all the way home. He always says Finn is the forest's mailman." "Then I'll come back tomorrow," Daniel said. "I want to hear more about those letters." And he did. The next day, and the day after that. At first, it was to help patch the roof with a tarp, then to saw off some charred branches still hanging dangerously low, then to clear the trail that led toward the forest's edge, where Finn often wandered. Each day, Finn appeared on the time in his usual unhurried way, as if he were the metronome for a new rhythm taking shape between two lost souls. One day, he brought back a whole wild rabbit. Daniel had to accidentally toss it out when Finn wasn't looking. Another time it was a half-burned teddy bear with one singed ear. Eliza froze when she realized it was Noah's old toy, lost to the wind long ago. "Seems like he's gathering pieces of memory," she said. On the fourth morning, just as the sun broke through a lingering veil of smoke above the pines, an engine rumbled from afar. A pickup truck, caked in red mud, pulled into the driveway. Eliza stood on the porch, shielding her eyes against the sudden light. Before the truck even stopped, the back door flew open. "Mom! Grandma! Finn!" A boy's voice rang out like sunlight slicing through shadow. Noah, hair tousled, eyes shimmering, shot out of the truck like a tiny arrow. Finn sprang up and, something Daniel had never seen before, let out a long, chirping trill, then bounded down the steps without hesitation. They met in the middle of the yard. Noah stopped just short, arms stretched out but not touching. Finn circled the boy once, tail brushing his ankle like a living ribbon. "I knew it," Noah whispered, voice trembling. "I told Mom and Dad Finn would survive. He knows the way home." Upon the porch, Rachel, Eliza's daughter, stood frozen. Her eyes reddened as she watched her son and the Bobcat, like two fragments of the same quiet miracle. Eliza stepped down from the porch and embraced Rachel tightly. Daniel stood quietly behind, his vision blurring as he witnessed this. People once parted, now drawn back together by a creature that once lived outside all their boundaries. Finn, as if sensing it all, sat down among them. He didn't move, didn't walk away. He simply looked toward Daniel, eyes steady as if to say, "Sometimes, all you need is someone to bring you home." Rachel, hair pulled back hastily, eyes bright just like Noah's, stepped forward when she noticed Daniel lingering by the corner. "You're Daniel, right? The one my mom mentioned on the phone?" She offered her hand, her smile warm enough to chase away the fatigue still clinging to her brow. "Thank you for being here. We were so worried about Mom. The network was down for days and no one could reach her." Eliza turned, her voice hoarse but clear. Daniel was the first one who saw Finn dragging the bag home. He followed him for 3 whole blocks of ash. Then she glanced at Daniel, softly adding, "You didn't just help me. You helped keep my hope from turning to dust." Rachel placed her hand over her mother's arm and gave a gentle squeeze. "Finn's the miracle of this family. I've never told Noah the full story, but now maybe it's time he sees it for himself." Daniel stepped back, meaning to leave space for their reunion. But Noah's small hand tugged at his jacket, eyes wide with hope. "Will you come to the bonfire party?" Daniel paused. "Bonfire party?" Rachel laughed. "It's a weird town tradition. After every disaster, fire, storm, power outage, everyone gathers whatever's about to spoil, meets at the elementary school field, and has a cookout. We eat and share what we've managed to hold on to." Eliza nodded. "It's like a reminder. No matter what we lose, we still have each other." Noah looked at Daniel, still not letting go. "And maybe Finn can come too." That evening, Whispering Pines glowed in an unusual light, not from electricity, but from flames and the voices of survivors. At the elementary school's concrete field, now covered in a thin red dust from the fire, makeshift tables were set up using old doors and wooden crates. People brought sausages, bread, mashed potatoes, even melting ice cream rescued from powerless freezers. The scent of wildfire still lingered in the air, but it was drowned out by music from a battery radio and the laughter of children. Kids chased each other through flashlight beams like ghosts playing tag. Daniel stood beside Eliza, backpack full of canned food, his humble contribution to the feast. But everyone smiled at him, most thanks to Eliza's introduction. "This is Daniel, the man who followed Finn across 3 blocks just to see where that bag was going." "You really followed him?" Mrs. Johnson, the grocer, blinked wide-eyed. "Most newcomers see Finn and lock their doors." "He didn't lock up," Eliza said. "He opened." Daniel smiled, unsure of what to say. But in the eyes of these strangers, there was no doubt, only something very Whispering Pines, acceptance born from someone daring to believe the impossible. Near the end of the gathering, Noah disappeared for about 10 minutes. When he returned from the forest's edge, people were passing around hot dogs and swapping stories. Noah wasn't alone. Finn walked quietly beside him, like a newly hired forest guardian joining the community officially. A few visitors from Sacramento, the relief team, flinched. One girl dropped her soda. A gray-haired man stepped back a half pace. "He's fine," Noah called out, voice clear. "Mom said Finn could come, if he promised to behave. And he did." Laughter rippled like a flame catching dry grass. Rachel stood near the main fire pit, hands clasped, anxious, but letting her son take the lead. Finn did nothing but sit next to Noah, lifted his head, twitched his ears, and accepted a piece of grilled meat from the boy's outstretched hands, full of reverence. Daniel stood next to Eliza, watching a scene that looked like a painting. The child, the bobcat, and a small town building new memories together. A young man, part of the church relief crew, walked up to Daniel, eyes still fixed on Finn. "That's a real bobcat, isn't it? At a bonfire party?" Daniel nodded, hands in his pockets. "His name's Finn, and yes, he's part of this place." "He's famous now," the guy said, chuckling and shaking his head. Daniel smiled faintly. "The truth is, he's always been. It's just, now people are starting to tell the story." And so, he told it. About the bag, about the ashes, about how a creature carried Eliza's small world back to where it belonged. He told the story in an even tone, but by the end, the young man's eyes had changed, as if he had just stepped into a myth that might be real. When Daniel finished, he realized he didn't need to embellish, didn't need to add a single thing. Because the eyes of those who listened, people who had lost homes, forests, memories, had already lit up with a single belief that something out there still knew the way back. "This bobcat," an old man said, voice like smoke. "He didn't just bring a bag, he brought hope back to the doorstep." Daniel gave a quiet nod. Some things don't need to be explained, only believed. Night fell over Whispering Pines like a thin blanket of ash. Someone brought out an old guitar, strings loose, body cracked, but still capable of carrying a tune. Songs without clear names, just fragments of sound everyone had known since childhood. Eliza sat beside Daniel, a tin cup in hand, its warmth lingering even though the water had gone cold. Rachel rested her head on her mother's shoulder, and Noah lay with his head in her lap, his mouth still sticky with ice cream. Finn lay a few steps away. Not too far, not too close. Just near enough to listen, not close enough to be touched. His tail swayed gently to the rhythm of the music. His gaze was silent but alive, as if he were memorizing every face, every sound, everything not yet lost. Daniel looked at the animal, then spoke softly, as if just to Eliza. People say animals can sense storms, feel fire coming, they know when to retreat, but I think they sense something else too. Eliza tilted her head. What do you mean? People, the cracks in us, where the light is missing. He looked at Finn. The bobcat's eyes reflected the firelight like amber flickers glowing in the dark. 7 years ago, maybe he came to heal a woman who had lost her way, and now, maybe it's a 6-year-old boy who needs to learn about friendship, or maybe it's a whole town that needs reminding it still has each other. Eliza held her cup a little tighter. And you? Daniel smiled. I think I needed someone to show me the way home. No one said anything after that. But in that silence, something was understood. Finn stood up, as softly as night mist. He walked toward Daniel, not hurried, not hesitant, and sat down right beside him, close enough to touch. Daniel leaned slightly. His hand, for the first time, reached out and hesitantly touched the fur marked with sun and smoke. Finn didn't pull away. He just tilted his head and let out a faint chirp, a late greeting, but full of trust. The guitar hummed on. Above, the first stars pierced through the thinning smoke and the breath of early winter wind. And in that small town coming back to life, Daniel Ross, the man who once thought he'd lost everything, quietly realized that home isn't the place you run to hide, but the place where good things find their way back to you. Like the old bag Finn had dragged through the ashes, like Eliza's eyes in the late light, like Noah's hand tugging on his sleeve. In the week that followed, people began telling the story about the bobcat that survived the fire, about the bag that came back just in time. Some said it had an old comb of Eliza's, long lost. Some swore they saw Finn standing in the flame, untouched. Daniel never corrected them, because he understood a story of survival is a good thing, but a story of survival with belief, that's what saves. Finn became a living legend of whispering pines, and Daniel, he was no longer the new guy. Every time he passed the grocery store, Mrs. Johnson called him by name. Every morning, he and Noah cleared the trail leading into the woods, the one Finn still guarded like a silent sentinel. And every time he retold the story, Daniel always began with a whisper. There are wild things, but not savage things. They're just waiting for someone quiet enough to hear them calling home.